Welcome to AIM Hour, an hour today with AIM and me, Itim-Parit Wacharasindhu.
ก่อนไปฟังบทสนทนากับผมและไอติมนะครับผมขอเวลาสั้นๆนิดเดียวครับแนะนำรายการใหม่รายการนี้ชื่อว่า AIM Hour นะครับเป็นรายการที่ผมเอ็มนพจักร อัตนนท์จะใช้เวลาประมาณ1ชั่วโมงกว่าๆในการพูดคุยกับแขกที่น่าสนใจซึ่งรายการนี้เราจะสัมภาษณ์เป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะครับสาเหตุหลักเป็นเพราะว่าผมได้เห็นบรรยากาศที่ดีมากครับคือบรรยากาศที่คนไทยนั้นอยากที่จะเรียนรู้ภาษาอังกฤษอยากที่จะสื่อสารเป็นภาษาอังกฤษซึ่งตัวผมเองแม้ว่าจะไม่ได้ใช้ภาษาอังกฤษได้เพอร์เฟกต์นะครับแต่ว่าก็พอที่จะสัมภาษณ์แขกรับเชิญเป็นภาษาอังกฤษได้อันนี้อธิบายไว้ล่วงหน้าก่อนที่จะไปติดตามบทสนทนากับไอติมขออภัยถ้าเกิดว่าภาษาอังกฤษของผมอาจจะไม่เพอร์เฟกต์บ้างนะครับแต่ว่าตั้งใจทำรายการนี้ขึ้นมาให้คุณผู้ชมได้เรียนรู้และติดตามไปด้วยกันครับ Good evening ไอติม
Good evening. It feels a bit odd speaking in English.
Yes, it's quite awkward. I interview you. No, actually, I have to say we interview Sandy.
Yes.
And I just realized that a lot of people in Thailand watch English interview. That's why I invite you over for a talk in English.
Sure.
You are the first guest in my new program.
Okay, I feel very honored, but also feel under pressure at the same time.
Do we see each other too often though?
I think recently quite often.
Yeah. Do I invite you too often? Is it like for you or?
I mean, I don't know what your policy is in terms of inviting speakers, but I think as long as you keep it diverse, then it should be okay.
Okay. But we just went to Berlin. Did you recover from the jet lag yet?
I think I recovered from the jet lag, but I think ever since I landed in Bangkok, I have been not really had that much rest.
I see.
Have still feel short of sleep. I didn't even have time. I mean, it's been about 2 weeks. I haven't even had time for a proper haircut, so I asked my girlfriend to help in order to save some time over the long weekend.
That's very sweet.
Yeah. So it's been a lot of work because right now I'm sitting in the parliamentary committee that scrutinizes the national budget. So it's like a 2-month sprint every year to go through the details of almost essentially every single baht that is going to be spent each year from taxpayers' money. So it's like they basically line up all the government units, so all the grom, not sure what the English word is, all the grom in every ministry to come and explain what they have done in the past year and then try to justify their budget requests. And then we as members of the parliamentary committee have to scrutinize and ask questions and then check whether each single baht that is being asked is justified or not. And if not, then we are entitled to propose to cut those budgets.
My producer told me not to get too intense in the interview, so I'm
Okay.
not gonna get into the details.
Okay, sure. We can talk about something else. I mean, I mean, this committee sits every day, and it may extend over the weekends as well. So that we can talk about something else.
Okay, we will get back to the countries and politics for sure, but
Okay.
It wasn't something like a reverse, like shock culture, right? A lot of people who went abroad come back and get a bit depressed that Thailand isn't as developed.
I think for me, I had already made up my mind that I would come back as soon as I graduated. So I went to study in UK when I was 13. So I took a scholarship exam at a secondary school in the UK and then got in and then spent 9 years there. So 5 years at secondary school and then 4 years at university. I then did a summer internship at a consulting company called McKinsey. But as soon as I graduated, so I did an internship in my final summer holiday before the final year of my university time. And then I decided that I wanted to come back to Thailand as soon as possible. So I came to work at the same company but in the Southeast Asian office. And the reason for that is I felt I've been far away from Thailand for too long. And I know that I eventually want to potentially enter politics as I see it as one of the a good mechanism for helping to develop this country and make this country better. So, and I felt that I needed to be back in Thailand as soon as possible. So it's a decision that was made up quite a long time ago. So it wasn't so much of a shock or a disappointment in that sense. Yeah.
You went to the UK and studied there with the scholarships.
Yeah, so I took it's not a state scholarship. So the secondary school that I went to, each year they hold an examination. So anyone can apply and then take a set of exams. And then they select about, I think, 10 to 15 per year that they give partial scholarships to. So I took the exam and then got in. Actually, a very lucky story because they normally give it to, I think that year they gave it to 13 people. And so when they announced the results, they actually announced the sequence of people that they gave it to as well. I said, like, this was the first person we decided to give it to, this is the second person. And actually, there was one person above me who kind of, I think one person above me who decided not to take the scholarship.
So you were on a waiting list or something?
So, they had to register that intent even before they took the exam. So they announced that this person, because in the end he did enter the school, but not on a scholarship. So he like forfeited his right to a scholarship. So that enabled me to just about scrape in. So I was the final person to be accepted as a scholarship student at the school. So yeah, that was a lucky break for me.
Speaking of your time in Oxford, one thing that quite standing out was the fact that you were a leader of Oxford Union, right? Am I correct? Do I call it right?
The title is president. Yes, president. So it's an elected position. So you have to.
So it matters.
I mean, every member of that committee has to run an election in order to be part of the committee, of the management committee. So I ran in about 4 elections during my time at Oxford. So right from, they call it the Secretaries Committee. So that's kind of the largest committee. I think there are 11 members. And then I ran for Standing Committee, which is the one above it, with slightly more responsibility. Then I ran for Treasurer, which is one of the kind of the 2 vice president positions, and then finally for president.
So you ran for 4 elections when you were in the UK.
Yes.
And how many did you win?
I mean, I won all 4.
You won all 4?
Yes.
Nice. But you lost one in
Lost
Bangkok.
the one in Bangkok. Lost the one that mattered.
But how did Oxford Union shape you?
So I mean, just to explain what the Oxford Union is, right? So it's not a student union that I think people would be familiar with. So like องค์การศึกษา that looks after student welfare. I mean, we have that at Oxford too. It's called the Oxford University Student Union, or in Oxford we call it OUSU, so OUSU. Oxford Union is something different. So it's not to do with the student welfare, but it's actually, it used to be just a debating society that was founded about 200 years ago. But it expanded to become more of kind of a debating and speaker society. So it's responsible for inviting external speakers to come and debate alongside with students and to come and, give talks and be questioned by students. So it's more like the way I explain it is it's a debating and speaker society. But it is one of the largest student societies in the UK. And it has quite an interesting story because it was founded 200 years ago based on the principle of free speech. So back then, I believe that there were some restrictions to free speech at the university. Certain issues were not allowed to be discussed. So a group of students got together and formed like this kind of secret club where they had a common understanding that in this place, it is a safe space to freely discuss and exchange ideas. And then that kind of, from that kind of, I guess, small start, it grew to become one of the larger student societies in Oxford. So, I mean, and that is a key principle, that freedom of speech is a key principle that we have to adhere to. And I think there are 2 major types of events that we hold. The first one is what we call weekly debates. So each term at Oxford, there are 8 weeks. The final week, sometimes we have exams, so we set that aside. So we have 7 debates per term. And we would normally, the president of the committee would set the topic to be related to certain controversial contemporary issues. And then you would invite speakers that both agree and disagree with that viewpoint to debate against each other. And that's very important. You always have to have 2 sides and we normally try to mix both sides. Some will be external speakers, so politicians, journalists, people from business who are experienced or have a viewpoint on that issue, as well as university students. And we give them equal importance and equal time, and they're all on an equal setting. And I looked up, because I knew you were going to ask this, so I looked up the motions. This is quite difficult to find, actually. Looked up the motions that when I was president, we set. So there were 7 topics, right?
How long was it?
Each debate.
I mean, like how long ago was it?
It was back in 2013. So almost 10 years ago.
Almost 10 years.
Yeah. So I had to try to remember what topics I said. But then having looked at it, it's quite interesting. So the first one, the motion is always in the format of like this house believes ... And then you have, one side agreeing with that motion and the other side disagreeing with the motion. So the first one was, this house has no confidence in Her Majesty's government. And this is like, every year, this is always like the first debate that we normally hold. And you would invite, government MPs as well as students who support the government to debate against opposition MPs and students who support the opposition. And it's basically I guess a replica or a mimic of the no confidence debate that happens in Parliament. So อภิปรายไม่ไว้วางใจ that we're seeing now. So that was the first one. And then there are other topics. I won't go through all of them, but there are some interesting ones. So there's one which is this house believes religion harms society more than helps society. So we had one side arguing that religion as a whole has a net negative impact on society. And you have the other side that argues otherwise. Right? So interesting debate. I remember it was quite heated there. And then there's one which is this house is proud to be patriotic. Because we know that this issue of patriotism, nationalism is, there's a fine line between being patriotic and being nationalist. And then how much should you give emphasis to what nation you're from or what is your nationality?
What would like รักชาติ in Thai terms translate?
So the way I define it is I think patriotic is รักชาติ or maybe like ภูมิใจในชาติ but nationalist is like on the verge of like คลั่งชาติ right? So I think it's up to the debate in terms of how we define that. But I think it sparked quite an interesting conversation because at the end of the day, especially in today's, at the end of the day, the lines that are drawn between borders are all man-made, right? They're all imaginary. And I think in today's day and age where we are seeing increasing globalization, we are seeing technology pretty much making border lines much less important. There's a question of whether how important is it that we associate or identify ourselves as a member of a certain nation rather than a member of the world or like a global citizen. Right? So that was an interesting debate. And the other one was this house believes socialism does not work. So you have two sides to the argument, people who may disagree with socialism and people who may agree with socialism. And I remember that day, Jeremy Corbyn, who back then was, in English, in the UK we call it a backbencher MP. So an MP who do not sit on the front benches. So they are not like one of the front runners of the party at the time. So he was a backbencher MP back then. But we knew that his ideology was very much to the left and very supportive of socialist principles. So we invited him to speak in favor of socialism. And then I think a few years later, he became more prominent and eventually became leader of the Labour Party, leader of the opposition. So it was interesting. It was an interesting debate, and that actually was the debate where I picked up that quote that we discussed in Berlin, where I said that to understand the difference between socialism and capitalism, maybe you can think about how you manage traffic, whether it's a traffic light or a roundabout, right? Because traffic lights you try to control and plan everything, which cars cross when. Whereas in a roundabout, you leave it to the kind of the free market and leave it to the decision of individuals. Side note, and an important note is that this analogy was given by a politician in that debate who did not support socialism and supported capitalism. So he was trying to make a case that roundabouts deal with traffic better than traffic lights. So I'm sure that people who support socialist principles may disagree with this metaphor and this analogy that it does not present an appealing case enough for socialism. But I mean, that's where, I developed some of the ideas and, try to learn from different sides of the argument. Yep.
I was impressed with Oxford because when I went there, I had lunch. I actually went there with Fuadi Pisawan. He took me there, and we had lunch there. And the room was so loud. I don't know, it was students and people who were there. Nobody was looking at their phones. They were having like debates all the time.
Yep.
Was it something that you grew up with?
I think so. Even at school, at my secondary school, we were always taught to always question. It's very important. When you hear something, the first thing you need to do is question first, right? So when we're in history lessons, and the teacher may tell a certain story about what happened in a certain period in history, when we are trained to always question and be curious and always ask and try to get to the answer. Even if we get the answer, we may agree or disagree with that answer. It's okay, but we always ask to kind of critically analyze and ask questions, right? And the education system that promotes that. It promotes questioning. It promotes people kind of criticizing or others' ideas and debating constructively. And I think it's an important part of the learning process. Talking to students in the Thai education system, a lot of them also comment that this is one of the pain points of Thai education, in the sense that sometimes when they have questions in their mind and they ask a question, sometimes they don't get an answer, or sometimes they're even punished for even asking the question, right? So I think that's not beneficial to the learning process of our younger generations and people in school. And I think with now students being able to access the online world, students' learning are no longer monopolized by the education system of that country. And that's why we're seeing students asking a lot of questions about our society, which are not discussed in the classroom, but actually discussed outside. So I hope one day that that culture of giving the freedom and the right to ask questions and have that debate, that dialogue also happens in our classrooms across the country.
I bet you learn so much outside the class during Oxford time.
At Oxford, actually, when we talk about outside class, that's the majority of the time. So when I was studying, I studied philosophy, politics, and economics, and each degree will have different timetables. But for PPE, or philosophy, politics, and economics, each week I have, I think, only about 4 hours of compulsory lessons or tutorials. We call them tutorials. So it's like a one-on-one lesson with a tutor, or maybe a two-on-one, so a tutor and two students. So only 4 hours per week, which is nothing, right? The rest is up to us in terms of how we design our schedule. And each week they will give you a question, a broad question. So for example, in philosophy, it will be like, how do you know that you? So it goes like this. So an example of a question is, they may say that when you're dreaming, you never know at the time that you're dreaming until you wake up. So how do you know that right now you're not dreaming? They give you that question, and then they give you a reading list, maybe like 20 books that they suggest. They don't expect you to read all of it. They just give it as some suggestion for you to be able to get some information. And then you're given 1 week to go and read those books or other books, or go to lectures that are optional, and then write an essay to come and defend against the tutor. So then you come with an essay, then you read through it, or sometimes you send it to them before, and then they basically start grilling you for an hour, and you have to defend your case for an hour. So it really trains you to kind of be responsible in terms of time management, because initially everyone struggled, right? They would leave it to the last minute because 7 days a week they spend 6 days doing something else, and then the 7th day then they get down to the essay. So it teaches you on time management, and then in that kind of classroom, and it's actually not a classroom. It's like an office, like a typical office room that the tutor works in, and then you have to defend your argument against him or her for an hour.
But the fact that you grew up in the room full of debates and you get all this environment all the time, And I didn't mean to mention anyone, but a lot of cynics might say that you guys like end up being like ดีแต่พูด you know like because you พูดเก่งมาก like you are so excel in debating, but when it comes to practical world, just different thing. My question is how would you explain like how important it is to grow up in the quiet intellectual world where people have debates?
I think firstly we have to separate between how well you can communicate versus how much you try to absorb a wide variety of opinions. Right? So I think for me, growing up in that education system that tried to expose you to debates, expose you to this, culture of always questioning, always being curious. It actually doesn't matter whether I end up being able to communicate well or not. I think what's most important is that you are exposed to a wide variety of views and you learn a lot of different perspectives. So when you look at a certain issue, you always try to understand and empathize all different viewpoints. Even if you have one certain viewpoint, you always try to understand how the people who may disagree with you think, right? And I think there's this phrase in English, I think, which is important, which is agree to disagree, which is, okay, this is my stance. I get now why you think differently. I just I just don't agree with you on this this premise 1, 2, 3, and then we agree to disagree. So we understand that we just have different opinions on this issue. And I think this is something which I try to implement in the real world, and try to every time I have a stance on something, always try to understand how people that think differently to me believe. And when I let's say I post something on Facebook on a certain policy recommendation, always try to see the people who disagree with me to understand what they're thinking, and then if it's something that we realize that actually they misunderstood us, then we clarify. If it's something which we just simply disagree, then we at least we understand where our differences are. Or if it's a viewpoint that we actually think, oh, I've never thought about that, there's a loophole in my argument, then we try to fix it. Right? So I think you learn a lot from people who disagree with you, and you probably learn more from people who disagree with you than people who agree with you. And I think that's an important part of the learning process. So that's separate from whether you end up being good at communications or not. But being good at communication or not, I think it's an important skill. But it's also separate from whether you can get things done or not. So you can have someone who is good at both, which is great. You can have someone who communicates well, but may lack the management skills to get things done. Or you may have someone who manages well but does not communicate well. Or you may have someone who's not good at either, right? So it's two independent variables. And I think at the end of the day, both communications and management, getting things done, are both important skills that I think whether in politics or in any other profession, I as an individual try to always improve on both.
Since I think this is the last question related to Oxford, but you probably answered this question like 100 times already, but in Thai language. Since we mentioned Oxford, the UK and Democrat Party, so what's the difference between you and Kun Apisit? I want to hear it in English.
Okay, let me go back to the previous question first. Actually, มีประเด็นหนึ่งที่ลืมพูดเท่าที่
Yeah.
ตอนนั้นถามเรื่องว่าดีแต่พูดใช่ไหม
Yes.
I was going to say I had something.
But you understand where I come from, right? I mean, like in Thai, they're gonna see like, okay, a big debater.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was part. This is actually a funny story. I was part of the debating society, but as president, you don't debate. You manage the organization. So you manage your team of elected committees who are all, like equivalent of politicians since they are elected and they set the policy. You manage the team of full-time staff who are probably like some of them were 3 to 4 times my age. So I was about 18. So there were people, some of the full-time members or full-time staff were like in their 50s or 60s. And then you manage the budget. So it's more management actually that I was doing for the Oxford Union than the debating. And then during the debates, as president, you would act as the chair of the moderator. So you're not allowed to kind of take sides and you just moderate the debate. So it's much, in all the debates I mentioned, I didn't debate in any of them. I just listened. So actually, people may have the perception that as president of Oxford Union, which is a debating and speaking society, you would debate a lot. Actually, no, I did not participate in debating at all. To your question, right?
Can I ask you another one?
Okay.
This one can be later. When you talk about you like debaters and a good listener, what impressed me was that the first time that we talk, I don't know if you recall this, but the first time that we communicate with each other, what as you send a line message to me, like you asked me for advice about politics and stuff, and I find that very humble of you. I mean, like not every big politician is gonna ask a journalist about politics, and I find that a good quality of you to be a good listener. So how did you are a good debater, also in the same time a good listener?
I think they're related actually, because I mean the more you listen to people's points of view, the more you can communicate with them effectively, right? Because if you're going to communicate something, you need to understand first your audience, like who are they, what are they thinking, right? And then that helps with you crafting your communication. So for example, if I need to present a certain policy, let's say my policy to abolish conscription, right? I need to understand first, like the people who, different stakeholders, what do they think of this issue, right? Especially the people who disagree with my proposal to abolish conscription. I need to think about what their counter arguments would be, and then try to be one step ahead of that, and clear all the counter arguments while presenting the case for that policy. So actually, listening a lot is very important. It's vital to being able to communicate. So I don't think there are substitutes of one another. I mean, to get a bit geeky, it's a positive correlation. It's not a negative correlation. So the better you are at listening to people, hearing people, then I think the better communicator you become.
Okay. Yeah. Now I want to get back to the questions. The difference between you and Kun Apisit, your uncle, right? How do we call it? Okay. You and Kun Apisit, maybe like the first time you get to answer this in English.
Yeah, I mean, I stick by the same answer, which is I think every person in this world is different to one another, right? So there are no two people who are identical on everything. I think for me, it's not my responsibility or even my place to evaluate what is the same between me and him or what is different. But now that I've entered politics, I think it's up to the people to evaluate for themselves what they see as similarities or what they see as differences. At the end of the day, every person in politics should be judged based on his or her own, actions, decisions, points of view, thinking, not based on, which family does he or she belong to or who does he or she know. Right? And I think that's very important. And when I entered politics a few years ago for the first time, I remember there was one sentence that I said, can't remember which interview. I said that I think people, because people have this perception, with a similar education background. Some people say it's also because similar looking, right? If I looked slightly more different to him, then maybe people wouldn't be asking this question.
You're a bit bigger.
But yeah, anyways, the sentence that I said was, I think some people will love me too soon, and some people will hate me too soon. So that's why I think when I entered politics, there were some people who suddenly were very positive of me, right? And I did not deserve that positive praise because I haven't done anything yet. But I think they only praised me because they thought I was like him and maybe they admire him. And on the other hand, there were some people who also potentially disliked me from the beginning as well because of that factor. So I think, I said that quite a few years ago, saying I think some people will love me too soon and some people will hate me too soon.
Yeah.
And I think there are, like a few years on, I think some people may fit that category. Yeah. I mean, of course, there may be people who loved me at the time back then and still love me.
Yeah.
And there may be people who have hated me consistently. That's okay. But yeah, I think that's, I think at the end of the day, it comes back to not speaking just for myself, right? Speaking for every person, actually not just in politics, but in every profession, you should always be judged based on merit, right? On things that you can control, on your decisions, on your words, on your actions, not on which gender you are, not which family you belong to, not based on the income level of your parents, for example. I mean that's a definition of a fair society.
But you must get to see a lot of people who might be disappointed. Some might even, I would say, heartbroken that they expect you to be like คุณอภิสิทธิ์ Turns out, maybe not.
Yeah, so that's in the category of people who love me too soon.
Yeah.
But it's okay. I mean, I as a politician, I need to stand by my decisions and my actions. Right? So if maybe they had a certain perception of me at the beginning, and I ended up doing something that's different to what they had expected me to do, right? Then I have to stand by my decisions. And I think in politics, you cannot make a decision that everyone agrees with, right? Because politics is about making tough decisions on policies that may have certain advantages and some policies that may have certain disadvantages. And then you can't expect everyone to agree with you. And I think it's more about how do you convince people that what you are presenting, what you are doing is actually going to make society better. Even if they disagree with you now, that someday they will come to agree with you. And yeah, I think that's important. And actually going beyond that, I mean there is I think this book by Tony Benn, a UK politician, that talked about two types of politicians. And he said there was one type which is I think he called it like a windmill, right? So I call it like a preference accommodating politician. So that politician or that type of politician would try to see what most people are thinking, right? On different issues, they may do like certain polling or surveys to see what most people are thinking, and then just go with whatever they think is going to be most popular. I mean that is not always a bad thing to try to listen to a lot of people and hear what they think. But there's also a second type of politician, which is what I call like preference shaping, or what I think Tony Benn calls it like a signpost politician. So it's not so much just seeing where กระแส or most people are thinking right now, but actually having a very clear view about what you think is best for society, and then try to convince people to agree with that view, right? So even if the majority disagrees right now, stick by that and then convince people to come on board later on. So there are two types of politicians, and I think there's no correct answer which one is better, but a clear example for anyone who follows UK politics, I think the first type is probably you would say someone like Tony Blair, right? Because he is normally seen as doing a lot of these polling numbers on every policy to make sure that he says something that is most popular with the majority of the electorate. Whereas on the other side you have people like on the right you have people like Thatcher. On the left you have people like Tony Benn, who are more like ideological. They have a very clear, unwavering viewpoint of what is good for society. They try to get people on board. And actually, both Blair and Thatcher were both very successful in terms of elections. I mean, their legacies and their policies to be debated, but at least in terms of elections, they did win. I think each of them won 3 successive general elections, right? So there's no right or wrong in terms of what type, but I think that's an interesting way to think about types of politicians in this world.
I was going to say that I want to maybe leading to some casual conversation, but then the UK politics topics kind of came up.
Oh, okay. This was not casual.
Ask my producer. I think she wants it to be more casual. We will get back to the UK politics later. But
Okay.
Relationships. Itim vanilla. Itim one. Your program, is it vanilla or vanilla?
It's actually a play on word, right? So vanilla. Itim is my name, and then vanilla.
Yeah.
When you say Itim vanilla, quickly it sounds like like vanilla ice cream. Right? So not strawberry, but vanilla. But it's also a play on word, which is vanilla, which is today I am on leave.
Yeah.
คือไม่ลาพรุ่งนี้ลาวันนี้
Yeah.
So that's the concept. I think in English it's called a pun. So when there's like a word that has double meaning. So for example, the previous company that I worked at, start D, right? It's also a play on word because it's also a pun because on the one hand it's start D, which is like a good start, but on the other hand it also sounds like study.
Yeah.
Right? So and education or that. So it's it's a pun.
But I think so. It's like your program, is it the ice cream or vanilla? How is it called? I don't.
Itim vanilla.
The ice cream.
I think it's written like vanilla like today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a project. When you call it a program, it sounds so serious.
But you told me that it was your girlfriend.
It was my girlfriend's idea, yes.
And you abide by it.
I am not creative enough to think of something like this. Actually, the name came from a joke that I once made.
It was her idea of the name or the idea that you guys are having a YouTuber, YouTube.
I mean, it's all her idea. I just once joked with her. It was a bad joke. I mean, I'm not the funniest person, but I once joked about this, like I think vanilla, to her, like a couple of years back. And then I think she must have remembered that joke. Probably one of the few bad jokes that she remembered. Then she, took that concept and then wanted to do a show. So it's more like a hobby or a project. But I mean, thank you for promoting it. I don't know if I should be happy or if I should be embarrassed. But the idea is that obviously, I am quite busy with work. So having enough time to spend together is always something that comes up. And this is one hobby or one project that we wanted to use as a mechanism to spend more time together. So one hobby that we do together is on days that I have some time and we do like certain recreational activities and we also do a vlog of it. Right,
It has been like 2 or 3 episodes, right?
We've had 2 episodes.
But it's not committed like you're gonna launch it every week or something like that.
I think she mentioned that it was weekly. And the fact that the 3rd episode has not come out for a month probably gives you a glimpse of what my work schedule is like.
How did you meet her and how did you จีบยังไง How did you end up being
I think it's like it's just a gradual getting to know process. I think nothing like there's no like
จีบ
single moment or anything spectacular.
It's quite a weird concept, right? I mean, like in Thailand, always when people ask about the beginning of relationship, like จีบยังไง which is sometimes it put people in a quite a wrong position as well. Because like sometimes people just don't จีบ just.
Yeah, I don't even know what the word จีบ in English is.
Yeah.
I've heard someone use like chirps,
Yeah.
but I think that's like has a different meaning. If someone has a different word that they want to suggest, then feel free. But I don't even know if there's a word for deep in English. But I think it's more like getting to know process. And I think that's been the case with me, in the past as well. And I think it's just, getting to know someone more, spending more time together, and then, realizing that actually, you want to spend more time together with that person. And I think for me, there are always like certain triggers or signals which make you think like, okay, this is going well. For me, I think the 2 important triggers or signals. The first one is when you feel very comfortable around that person, right? Because in the initial stages of getting to know each other, sometimes it can be a bit awkward. You have to think of activities to do together. I'm sure this happens in other relationships as well at the beginning. And then it gets to a stage where you're comfortable just sitting in a room doing nothing, right? You both could be working, and then you feel comfortable, and you feel like you can be yourself around that person. I think that's one signal which makes you realize that this relationship, or this could turn into a relationship, and this is going well. I think the second signal is I think when you feel like you know that person for longer than you actually know that person. So even though you've met that person for let's say like 3 or 4 months, but you feel like you've had good conversations and you feel like you've known that person for a long time, even though factually that's not correct. I think for me those are 2 important signals.
Yeah, I like how you are like factually.
I'm like scientifically analyzing
your own words.
Yes, this is. I always get teased about this, and I always like overanalyze and try to Yep.
Yeah, but you mentioned that you are super comfortable being around her. I want to know like what's are the things that maybe you do when you are with her that you don't do when you are with someone else.
I think singing is one.
You
So-
are joining the correct party. You mentioned about singing and Kun Thanathorn.
Yeah, I mean, my record with singing is not great. The first time I failed in an exam was a singing exam. This was back when I was I think Pond 1, so grade 1. Yeah, at a Sathit Jula, so a school in Thailand.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, they gave out 20 points for singing a certain song. Right? I think 5 points were allocated for lyrics. I think I did well on that because I was able to memorize things quite quickly when I was young. The other 5 points were allocated for rhythm. That's okay. I mean, I know my rhythm. I know the beats. And then the other 10 points were allocated for melody or for tone. I got 0 on that. So overall, I failed.
How old were you?
I was what? So grade 1 was like 7 years old, right? Around
Yeah,
there.
I was thinking if I'm a teacher and I'm about to give a 7 years old 0, must be very, very bad.
Well, let's not prove it here. But let me say this. Ever since then, right? I've been trying to stay away from singing. When I was at school in secondary school in the UK, the school was divided into different houses, like in Harry Potter, right? And each year there is a singing competition. So each house will choose a song, they will sing together. Each house is about 50 people, and we practice, a few weeks leading up to it. Every year, whoever's responsible, like the head person who's responsible for that competition, will come up to me and say, "Can you just lip sync, please?" So there are 50 of us, but please lip sync on the real day. Every year, and it's actually a fear of me when it comes to singing.
Yeah.
And like in election campaigning in Thailand, you're often asked to sing a song right, as candidates, right? When you go to like events in the communities. And I was so happy when I was campaigning in the previous election when the election laws came out. So the election laws would come out about 2 months before. Most of the rules would be about like limitations on funding and like about like regulations regarding fair competition. But one of the articles said that you're not allowed to take part in mahorasop, right? Which I think it means like an entertainment event. So if you want to be like legally conservative or to make sure you're safe, then the legal team in the party will say like don't engage in singing activities. And I was like, I am so happy. And I went around with this article whenever someone asked me to sing, like I'm legally not allowed to. I'm legally not allowed. But then I thought, they banned mahorasop, which is an entertainment event, because they feel like if you host an entertainment event, people are going to vote for you and it's unfair, right? But I'm pretty sure my singing does not classify as entertainment. Or at least not entertainment in terms of it being pleasurable. And I mean, this is a fear, even at companies.
Yeah.
I mean, we have like company parties. And karaoke is quite a popular activity amongst the Thai communities. And I'm always asked, like, please just sing one song. It can't be that bad. I give them the explanation. It can't be that bad. I always get like peer pressure. And whenever I end up, singing, they never ask me again. And in future events, if I go with the same group, they never ask me again to sing. So I think, there is that scientific proof and list of evidence in terms of my bad singing record. So that's something I only do around my girlfriend. I don't think she wants me to be myself when I sing.
Yeah, I'm not gonna ask you to sing.
Oh, thank God.
But no one have heard it, right? Because like I was thinking about Kun Thanathorn and people. There are some viral video that him singing, but I don't think in your case there has been like a single video of you singing. I'm not asking you. Don't worry.
I'm worried now. I don't think so. But I'm sure some of my friends and my colleagues probably have it in their mobile phones. And I mean, now is the time for me to say, like, please do not release them.
And what songs would you sing around your girlfriend?
Anything that just comes to mind.
Is it English or Thai song, British or
Mostly like songs on TikTok now. So now it's like what, like Hermione. But yeah, I mean, it's not like I intentionally think like, oh, I'm going to sing and I sing.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I'm working, some song pops in my head and I just, be too much of myself.
Yeah, that's a good thing though, because like, to consider how busy you are, people might feel like they want you and your girlfriend to have more free time to relaxing and but yeah. So it's good that we hear that you are able to sing around her.
But I don't know if it's relaxing for her.
Speaking of relationships, the concept of monogamy, polygamy, and I think it's a big thing that people discuss over in the last few years. Do you believe that people might say monogamy is kind of against human nature?
Monogamy is against human nature.
Yeah.
Okay, my principles on relationship is the same as the principles or core values underlying democracy. So number one is liberty, right, or freedom, which is there is no right format of relationship. It's up to the freedom of people to choose what type of relationship they want to engage with, right? And it's important that you get consent from that person, right? So liberty and consent is very important. No one should be forced to be in a relationship that they don't want to enter. Right? That's number one. Number two is equality, which is if I do something, then if I do something, then my partner or partners have to be entitled to do the same thing. So it's not like I get upset when my girlfriend does something, but then I do it myself. Right? So there has to be equality. So don't do things that you are not okay with your partner doing. So two very basic values: liberty and equality. So for me, if I apply those principles to this particular example, I guess I would have to say that provided it's like a polygamous relationship where every member of that relationship, regardless of how many there are, have given consent to be in that relationship, so they know the situation and they willingly enter into that relationship. That's fine. And then secondly, provided that everyone is kind of treated with equal respect, treated on equal terms, then that is fine too, and we respect that.
That's a very good answer. I was asked you to sort of pick between polygamy and monogamy, but you end up give me a smart answer without picking one. It's very good.
I think it's always important to question your values, right? So for me, like when you mention relationship and you mention a very difficult dilemma, you always fall back on your values. And I think this is the same with, whenever anyone asks me questions about anything, and maybe that's why I get teased about like trying to overanalyze everything. When you're not sure of an answer, fall back on your values. And then when I think about my relationship, I two important values: liberty and equality. Then you apply that to that specific example. And if you find out that actually gives you an answer that you're not comfortable with, then maybe you need to start questioning your values, whether they're really your values or not. So for me, if I am consistent with those values, I would say that for me, I personally prefer a monogamous relationship in the sense that I have never tried or have never wanted to try a polygamous relationship. But if another person who has different preferences to me want to be in a polygamous relationship and is a consentful one and one where everyone is treated with equal respect, then that's okay. And I respect that diversity, right? Not like everyone has to have the same preferences about everything.
The final 20 minutes, I think I've got a permission from my producer to talk politics.
Oh, we haven't talked politics? I'm pretty sure in the past we've talked a lot on politics. Okay, sure.
Okay, UK or Thai first?
Up to you.
Okay. UK politics. The UK is about to have the new Prime Minister. Just a simple question. Do you follow it, and what's your analysis?
I follow it, but obviously not as closely as Thai politics. And ever since, I follow it a lot while at university because it's an important part of, while studying there as well. So I follow it a little bit, but not that closely. But I'm aware of the situation roughly that's ongoing. So I mean, the current Prime Minister Boris Johnson has just recently announced his intention to resign. So he is from the Conservative Party. They won the last general election with him as leader. And in terms of the procedure in UK politics, once the Prime Minister resigns, then they will have that party will host kind of elections within the party or whatever process they have within the party to select a new leader, and that new leader will automatically become the Prime Minister without there having to be a general election. But normally, public pressure will say you don't have a mandate because you didn't win the general election yourself, and often he or she will be eventually forced to dissolve Parliament or Yup Sabha. But it's interesting to see right now because there's an ongoing internal election. So an election battle amongst Conservative Party candidates in terms of who becomes the new leader. And whoever wins that internal election also becomes the next Prime Minister as well.
When we watch the UK Parliament, it's full of like debates, and their debating styles are just totally different. It's quite unique. Would you prefer to be in that sort of like parliament compared to the Thai one?
I mean, it's not supposed to be that different because I think, Thailand, when we transitioned to democracy, we modeled our system to be a lot like the UK. I mean, we are a unitary state, so Rat Dio, not a federal state or Sahpantarat like the USA. We are a parliamentary system, so Rabot Ratha Sabha, right, where the government and the legislature, so Barihan, Community Banyat, are related, สัมพันธ์กัน So I mean, whoever becomes Prime Minister, head of the government, must have a majority in the parliament. Not like in the US where it's a presidential or ระบบประธานาธิบดี which is, you elect a president separately from members of parliament or members of House of Representatives and Congress, right? So I mean, it's supposed to be similar. Maybe it did not turn out to be too similar. But I think the UK is quite well known for that kind of environment of there being constant questioning, constant debate, actually very similar to the education system that we talked about. And I always say this, right? If you want to understand a certain country's politics, go and look inside that country's classroom, and it will tell you a lot in terms of what the political culture is like. And I think one thing that I really like about UK politics, and it's like a weekly thing that I did when I was a student, is every Wednesday, I think if it's still the same, it's Wednesday at 12 p.m., so Wednesday noon, there will be a called Prime Minister's Questions.
PMQ.
So it's an hour where the Prime Minister enters into Parliament and he or she has to answer questions from MPs. And I think normally in the 1 hour, there will be like 50 minutes allocated for questions from the leader of the opposition. And it's like back and forth, right? So you have the UK Parliament is, it's like two sets of benches that face each other. And that's because traditionally it's been a two-party system. So it's very clear, like the government side sits on one side, the opposition sits on the other. And then when the PMQs or Prime Minister's questions happen, the Prime Minister and the leader of opposition are face to face like this, actually not that far apart. They're not that much further than we are now. And they take turns, debating each other. And that's important for a leader to answer questions, not just from leader of the opposition, but from other MPs as well. Because at the end of the day, the questions that MPs are asking him or her are questions that the people have. And they're asking on behalf of the people. Right? They're representing the people. And that's why it's a big disappointment in Thai politics right now that our current Prime Minister does not give importance or time to answering questions in Parliament. He's not even an MP. That's also a big factor. Because then he feels even less responsible. Or he even feels like he has a reason to not be in Parliament. But I think for me, if we want to have that system of constructive debate, then we should change the constitution to say that the PM must also be a member of Parliament. And I think we must expect the Prime Minister to be answering questions on a weekly basis to other MPs. I think that's important.
Just out of my curiosity, If you were a politician in the UK, which party would you like join, align with you?
Very hard now. Think
The Labour or the Conservatives, or else?
I think for me it would be not possible to join the Conservative given their stance right now, for sure, because I mean they've, especially their stance on Brexit, I disagree with. Right? I mean, I'm not a UK national, but I think if I were a UK national, I would disagree with leaving the European Union. So you can cut that out. Then it would be between Labour and Liberal Democrats, right? I mean, I probably don't know enough about their policies right now because actually one interesting thing about UK parties is that the ideology broadly will remain the same, but because traditionally it's a two-party system, each party will have a wide range of or a spectrum of viewpoints. So even like within Labour, there'll be different shades of ideology, right? And within the Conservative as well. So for example, if you stick to the left-right spectrum, right, the Conservatives under David Cameron steered a little bit towards the center, and then under Boris it went back to the right. Right? Under Thatcher it was very much to the right. Whereas for Labour, Tony Blair shifted Labour more towards the center, right? And then Jeremy Corbyn took it to the left, and now you can think Keir Starmer. I don't know too much about his policies, I have to admit, but I think he's shifting more towards the center. So it adjusts quite frequently based on the leadership of that party.
A bit surprised that that's like the first time you get this question.
Yeah, I never thought about it. I mean, never thought about being in UK politics.
Okay, now that you never thought about being in the UK politics, Thai politics, what should we have seen if you were elected 4 years ago?
I think if I were elected 4 years ago,
what should we see your performance during the last like 3 years? That
I think I'd be sitting here because I mean, remember I ran for the Democrat Party, and they ended up joining the government. So I think I'll be sitting exactly where I am today.
You might resign. You mean?
Yeah, I mean it's against what we had promised the electorate.
Yeah, but like a lot of them resign, but then how did they do it? Like they cannot change the party, right?
I mean, it's the same principle, right? I mean, so I was not elected MP, but I resigned for the party for two main reasons. Number one is, I mean, the party just went back on what it promised to the electorate, and me as a candidate, I went around campaigning, telling real people that if you vote for me, we will not support Prayut, and I don't know if that person ended up voting for me or not, but we did not do that. So we pretty much just lied, right? I mean, I didn't know it at the time, but we pretty much lied to the electorate. So with the party not, keeping the promise that it made to the electorate, then I think that's a big issue. That's a big problem. The second reason is that even if we did not promise at the time to not support Prayut, I think the fact that the Democrat decided to join a coalition that's led by Palang Pracharat and that propped up General Prayut as Prime Minister, I think that goes against my core principles and ideologies, because it means that the Democrat Party approves of what has been happening in the past, in the lead up to that election, where you have the military regime that staged a coup, pretty much writing their own constitution and the laws to be at their advantage and not ensuring that there is free and fair competition or free and fair set of rules in the constitution. So by joining that coalition, you're pretty much saying that all of that is acceptable to you. And for me, it's not acceptable to me. So even if I was elected back then as a Democrat MP, I would have to resign. Maybe I can say a bit more in Parliament right before resigning. So maybe a few more minutes in Parliament to make my case before resigning.
But you would still be an MP, right? I mean, legally.
No. So if you resign, I think in the current constitution, if you resign, then you resign as an MP as well.
I see.
So if you resign from a party, you resign as an MP as well. Which is why you realize that all the so-called Ngu Hao, who was elected on one party and then is now voting with the other party. They haven't resigned from the party because if they resign from the party, they would have to resign as MP as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say like you can choose to be like a reverse งูเห่า you know, you'll be the first MP that like on the government side but vote on the opposite.
I mean, by definition, that's also, I guess, we're getting into complex territory now, but I guess that's also, it depends on how you define งูเห่า. If you say งูเห่า is that you were elected from a certain party and you end up sitting with another party, if you define that as งูเห่า, then if I was elected as Democrat, but then vote together with a different party, I'm also a งูเห่า. But then that does not take into the fact that the Democrat Party themselves went back on the promise they made with the electorate. So it's like double, depends how you define it. It gets complex now, but at the end of the day, I think my stance is clear. And if had I been elected back in the last general election, I think what may have changed is that before the Democrats decided to enter the coalition government, maybe as an MP, I mean, at least I had a vote, but we know that in the end, the vote that was taken by the Democrat Party was not that close, right? It was 80% joining the government, 20% not joining. But if I was an MP at the time, at least I would have had a vote in that internal election, and I would maybe have had more of a say in the eventual decision. But I mean, even if I was an MP back then, I think my one voice would change the eventual decision of the party, and I would have to resign. And then, yeah. So if you ask me where I would be, I think I would be sitting exactly in the same place here.
Would be nice though to have like a Democrat, like on paper you are like Democrat MP, but then you keep voting against the government.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, there's a big debate actually, because if I had been elected, then there would have been a debate on whether I was elected based on people giving a mandate to me personally, or people giving a mandate to the party.
That's right. Yeah.
So I mean, that's the complexity of it all.
That'll be too complicated for you, like personally, like you do.
I mean, it's yeah. I mean, for me, to be honest, if the party had taken the decision to join the government, then I think no individual is bigger than the party, right? I mean, of course, I would say that the party betrayed the electorate because they went back on their promise, but at the end of the day, the party has made that decision, and if I disagree with it, it's my responsibility to resign from that party. So I think, yeah, I would have had to resign.
Okay. Last question, because my producer told me to. Okay, I was asking you about the last 4 years. Okay, the next 4 years, if you get elected, what should we expect to see from you?
From me or from the party as a whole?
Both.
Both, I guess. I mean, the country is at an inflection point. I mean, we've just come out of multiple crises. I think we've come out of the COVID crisis that has hit the economy quite hard. I mean, we're not even sure if we've come out of it yet, but we're on the way out. And we've seen, a severe impact on the economy. We've seen a lot of people losing their jobs. We see a lot of SMEs going bankrupt, not being able to continue. We're now also seeing, not related to COVID, but also a cost of living crisis as a result. So on the one hand, there's that kind of short-term economic problem that we need to fix. The second one is probably a longer-term economic challenge. So regardless of all those crises, we're also facing multiple challenges that are new to this country. We are in an aging society where the proportion of the working age population or the workforce is reducing day by day. I mean, I think a couple of years ago, the ratio between working age people and non-working age people were 4-1. So for example, if you think of it simply, it's a group project. 4 people get together, they work, they pay their taxes, and then those taxes are used to fund one elderly person, right? Now, in a few years' time, that ratio from 4-1 is going to be down to 2-1. So instead of that project being done by 4 people, we're now saying only 2 of you bear that responsibility. And in, I think 20 years' time, 20, 30 years' time, if we do nothing, that ratio is going to be 1-1. So instead of a group project with 4 people, it's down to 1 person to look after one elderly person. So it's a big challenge there. We also have a challenge regarding the climate crisis. If we don't reduce greenhouse gas, not just as a country, but as the world, then that's going to have huge impacts on our economy and the quality of lives of people as well. And it's actually going to impact the people with lower incomes more than people with higher income. It's going to, the natural disasters that's going to come from it, it's going to impact our farmers and agricultural workers. And then we have, the imminent crisis of increasing inequality. So inequality that is already high is going to increase even more because as technology comes in, of course it will open certain opportunities, but on the other hand, it may replace certain professions and certain jobs and lead to higher and more frequent unemployment, right? So, we have that short-term economic crisis. We have this, macro, economic challenge. And then finally, we also have a political crisis. I mean, we have not returned to a democracy. I mean, right now, I would not say that we are in a democracy. I mean, especially with the current constitution that gives the unelected senators the power to vote on who becomes prime minister. We are not a democracy. But even if that, temporary article is gone, we still have seen an increase in the power of unelected political institutions like the appointed Senate, like the Constitutional Court, like the independent organizations that have the power by law to contradict the will of the people that is registered at each general election. So I mean the Constitution is still still short of global democratic standards, and we also seeing increasing violations of people's civil rights and liberties, sometimes via the use of certain laws as well. So short-term economic crisis, long-term economic challenge, political crisis. These are three huge crises that we need to fix. So I think if I were to be given a chance by the people to be in parliament, I think these are the three big issues that we need to fix. And I think if we talk about like how to fix them, right? I think on the one hand, I mean three quick things. If we think of a country as a piece of cake, right? And let's say that cake represents the aggregation of everyone's income, right? If you add everyone's income together, then it becomes that piece of cake. I mean, in economic terms, it's the GDP of the country. I think we're facing three issues. One is the cake is not growing. We're growing slower than our neighboring countries. So the question is, how do we grow our economy, especially after the COVID crisis? And I think this is a question of trying to find new growth engines for our economy. I think we've been too reliant on exports. We've been too reliant on tourism, which means that when external crises come, we are severely hit. So how do we find new growth engines for the country? Can we turn the issue of aging society that I mentioned into an opportunity to grow our care economy, or the economy that supports looking after the elderly population? Can we turn what is now the climate crisis into an opportunity to boost our green economy, create jobs that are friendly to the environment and actually reduces our carbon footprint? So, and then I think all of that needs to be supported by a reform of the education system. How do we make sure that our curriculum, the way we teach, the way we assess students, help to foster the critical thinking skills, communication skills that are needed, teamwork skills that are needed for the future, instead of an education system that focuses on getting people to memorize and just injecting loads and loads of information in them. So that's how we grow the cake. The second then is, how do we divide the cake fairly? Because if the cake grows, but it only grows for some members of the country, then that's not a society we want to live in. So how do we make sure that the cake is divided fairly? And I think there are a few things that we try to push as a party. We're trying to push for a welfare state that helps to look after people and help to combat with the increasing inequality that we are seeing. So things like increasing the pension benefits from currently 600 to 1,000 baht per person per month to 3,000 baht, as well as making the child care benefit, or the child benefits, or the benefits for children from 0 to 6 years to increase from 600 baht that is targeted to a few people to be a universal benefit for every child between 0 to 6, and increase the level to 1,200 baht per child per month. So this, creating a welfare state that helps look after people from when they're born to when they eventually leave this world. We also think about how to divide fairly in terms of decentralization. Right now, we know that the funding and the power is concentrated in the central government. So how do we decentralize so that every local communities or provinces or every province can elect its own leader? So make sure that the top executive of each province, instead of being a puwa or a governor or mayor that is appointed by the central system, to be one that is elected by the people and have the enough funding to be able to solve the problems for people in the provinces, as well as promoting competition and breaking up monopolies that may rely on certain unjust laws. For example, our current proposal to promote competition in the alcohol industry is one example of breaking up those monopolies and helping to increase opportunities for SMEs. So that's how we divide it fairly. And then finally, we have a cake that is now growing. We have a cake that is now more fairly divided. The question is, how do we make it delicious? Because if it's not delicious, then we don't want to eat it. Yeah. And that for me is democracy. So democracy both in terms of a democratic system, drafting a new constitution that is drafted by people who are elected by or an assembly or sosaro that's elected by the people, as well as amending laws that currently are not doing enough to protect people's civil rights and liberties, as well as creating a democratic culture. So not necessarily just the system and the laws, but also promoting democratic values in our classrooms, in our office, or even in our households, right? To make sure that this free and open discussion in the classroom is happening, to make sure that every relationship or partners in each relationship treat each other with respect equally, and trying to promote those democratic norms in every aspect of society. So I think that for me is our vision of how to make the cake bigger, how to make the cake more fairly divided, and how to make the cake delicious. I mean, I just want to be a small part in driving
making
Thailand
cakes.
toward, in making that cake. Yes, correct.
Thank you very much. It wasn't that odd or awkward, right? I mean, an hour in English talking to each other.
No, I think it's good practice for. I mean, I hope it's beneficial for everyone. Because I mean, if you want to improve your English, I think we need to create an environment where people are comfortable with speaking in English without being too worried whether they will get it right or wrong. I mean, I'm pretty sure in that 1 hour, I probably got some sentences that are grammatically incorrect. But at least I hope I was able to communicate and get my message across. And that's important, right? I mean, your grammar doesn't have to be perfect. Your accent doesn't have to be the same as, a person from a certain country. As long as you practice communicating and then making sure you get your message across, and that is fine.
Yeah.
I think the education curriculum should be based on that too. So focus less on knowing the language, the principles behind it, the grammar, and focusing more on creating an environment that allows people to dare to practice English. And I hope this show is one small tool for people to use to practice English. And I think being comfortable in terms of speaking English to a Thai person is important, because if you're not comfortable speaking English to a Thai person, then how are you going to practice your English?
A conversation as well. So pardon my Nakhon Sawan accent while I was talking to an Oxford.
It's not, I mean, actually it's important. I don't think there is one, I mean, we should not care at all about accents.
Yeah.
I separate between pronunciation and accent. Pronunciation is just making sure that you understand what I'm saying. Accent, there is no correct accent. Even in the UK, there are like tens and hundreds of accents depending on.
Scouse and such.
Yeah, and I don't even know what my accent is now. And I remember going to my best friend's wedding in the UK, and that was after I worked in Malaysia for a while, Sri Lanka for a while, and then coming back to Thailand, and he was like, "You speak very differently to how you used to speak back when we were at university." And it's okay.
Yeah.
I think he still understands what I'm saying.
Yeah, I understand you the whole time. Thank you very much. Our phone keep ringing the entire hour, but I mean, I had a good time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
WorkPoint Today สาระความรู้เพื่อวันนี้